Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
Oh, well, I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately. But I play with a wonderful expression. When it comes to piano, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches card for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday, when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing were dining here with me, that 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I've often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens. Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have had very little experience of it myself up to the present. I have only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't think I am very much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir, it is not a very interesting subject. I rarely think of it myself.
Very natural, I am sure. That will do, Lane, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set a good example for us, what on earth is the use of them? They seem as a class to lack every sense of the moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours, neighbours.
Got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire?
Ugh, perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them! By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire? Oh, yes, of course. Hello. Why these cups? Why the cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who was coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta. And Gwendolen.
Oh, how perfectly delightful.
Yes, it is all fine and well. However, I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear boy, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way she flirts with you.
Well, I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic about proposing. It is certainly romantic to be in love, but there's nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One normally is, I believe. Then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If I ever get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
Oh, I have no doubt about that, dear Algy. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There is no use speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Ow! Don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered specially.
But you have been eating them all the time.
That is quite a different matter. They were ordered for my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is too.
Well, you need not eat as if you were going to eat it all. You behave as if you were married to her already. You're not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth would you say that?
My dear boy, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth, and it accounts for the extraordinary numbers of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give you my consent.
Your consent?
My dear boy, Gwendolyn is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, we'll have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily.
Bring in the cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say that you have had my cigarette case all this time? Well, I wish to goodness you would let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I certainly wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
Well, there is no good offering a reward now that the thing is found.
I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes no matter. For now that I look at the inscription on the inside, I find that the thing isn't yours after all.
Well, of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times. And you have no right to read what's written inside. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. Why, more than half of modern culture is depending on what one shouldn't read.
Oh, I am quite aware of the fact. And I don't propose to discuss modern culture with you. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone by the name of Cecily. And you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady she is too. Lives in Tunbridge Wells.
Then why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear boy, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That is a matter that surely my aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. Oh, for heaven's sake, just give it back to me, Algy.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. Now, there is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
But you have always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as though your name was Ernest. You're the most earnest-looking person I've ever seen in my life. It is absurd to say your name isn't Ernest. Like, it's on your cards. Ah, yeah, here's one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. I'll keep this as proof your name is Ernest if ever you try to deny it to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not clear up why your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Go on, you had much better have the whole thing out at once.
My dear Algy, you speak exactly as if you were a dentist. It's very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
But that is what dentists always do. Now, go on, tell me the whole thing. I may mention, I've always suspected you of being a secret and confirmed Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are so kind as to tell me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, first produce my cigarette case.
Here it is. Now produce your explanation, and pray make it improbable.
My dear boy, there's nothing improbable about my explanation at all. It's quite ordinary, in fact. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as uncle from motives of respect, which you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
And where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. But I can tell you quite candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that much, my dear boy. I have bumburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Tell me why you're Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Oh, my dear fellow, I don't know whether you will be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce to either one's health or one's happiness. In order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Ernest, who lives in the Albany, and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
Oh, the truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That would not be at all a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not my forte, my dear boy. Don't try it. Leave that for the people who haven't been at a university. They do it so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a bunburyist. You're the most advanced bunburyist I've ever met.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest in order that you might be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented a permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I might be able to go out to the country as often as I like. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight. I've been really engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
Wait, I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You're so careless about sending out invitations. It is very childish of you. Nothing annoys people more than not receiving invitations.
Well, you had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dined there on Monday. And once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I am always treated as a member of the family, and sat down with either no women at all, or 2. In the third place, I know exactly whom she will place me next to tonight. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who is always flirting with her own husband across the dinner table. It is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent, and that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly disgraceful. It looks so bad. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. In fact, I think I shall kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Ernest. And I strongly advise you do the same with with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
And nothing could induce me to part with Bunbury, and if you ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you'll be glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
Oh, that is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, and she's the only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is a company and 2 is none.
That, my dear young friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
And that the happy English home is proven in half the time.
Oh, for heaven's sakes, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear boy, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There is such a lot of beastly competition about. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I manage to get her away, so that you might have the opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
Oh?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about their meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I am feeling quite well, Aunt Augusta.
That is not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you look smart.
I'm always smart, aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
Oh, you are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not that. It would leave no room for developments. And I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we were a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I shall have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Thank you, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane! Where are the cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially. Ah, good heavens, Lane! Where are the cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My dear Aunt Augusta, I am greatly distressed to hear that there are no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed colour, from what cause I, of course, cannot say. Thank you. I have quite the treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She is such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It is delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid I should have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he's accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is, I have just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury has just fallen in. He seems to think I should be with him.
It is very strange this Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes. Poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd, nor do I in any way approve of this modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is a primary duty of life. I am always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice as far as any improvement of his ailment goes. I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday. For I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has said practically whatever they needed to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious. And I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. The music, of course, is a great difficulty. You see, when one plays good music, people don't listen. And when one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'm sure I could run over the program I've drawn out if you'll kindly follow me into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. That is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think they are improper and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed I believe is so. Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else, and it makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back into a room suddenly that I have often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I have met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met. Since I met you.
I'm quite aware of the fact, and I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always held an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines, and has even reached the provincial pulpit, I am told. And my ideal has always been to love someone with the name of Ernest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. From the moment Algy first told me that he had a friend called Ernest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen.
Passionately.
Oh, darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest.
But your name is Ernest.
Well, yes, I know. But suppose it was something else. Do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation. And like most metaphysical speculation, has very little reference to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, I don't much care for the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolen, I think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack. Oh, no. There is very little music in the name of Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack has a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only real safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolen, I must be christened at once.
What?
I mean, we must get married at once. There isn't a moment to lose.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you are not entirely indifferent to me.
I adore you. But nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it's an admirable opportunity. And to save you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Oh dear, Gwendolen.
Yes, Mr. Worthing. What have you got to say to me?
You know what I have got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolen, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you've been about it. I'm afraid you have very little experience on how to propose.
My own one. I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have. They are quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthy! Rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma! I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me? You are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she could be allowed to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to put on you, Mr. Worthy. And while I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
In the carriage, Gwendolen. Gwendolen, the carriage!
Yes, Mamma.
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. Although I have the same list as dear Duchess of Bolton has, we work together, in fact. However, I am ready to enter your name should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke? Ah.
Well, yes, Lady Bracknell, I must admit that I smoke.
I'm pleased to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I'm of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know... nothing, Lady Bracknell?
I'm pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death? Land seems to be either profit or pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That is all that can be said about land.
I have a country house with some land attached to it, of course. About 1,500 acres, I believe. But I do not rely on that for my real income. No, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who make anything of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl of a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolen could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I have a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let out by the year to Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back whenever I please, within 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
Oh, she goes about very little. She's a lady considerably advanced in years.
Oh, nowadays there is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
Oh, the unfashionable side. I knew there was something. However, that can be easily altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
I'm afraid I really have none. I'm a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as tourists. They dine with us or come in the evenings at any rate. Now, on to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
Both? To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, is regarded as misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call people of commerce? Or did he rise from the ranks of aristocracy?
I'm afraid I don't really know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said that I had lost both my parents. It would be nearer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't know who I really am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of very kind and charitable disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It's a seaside resort.
Where did the charitable gentleman who had the first-class ticket to the seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was in a handbag. A somewhat large black leather handbag with handles on it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
On what locality did Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across an ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. The bag was given to him in mistake for his own.
A cloakroom in Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial, Mr. Worthing. I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life, which remind one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate moment led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at the railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion, and has probably indeed been used for that purpose before now. It could hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognized position in good society.
Well, may I ask then what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say that I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
Mr. Worthing, the bell. I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
I don't know how I could possibly manage that. I could produce the handbag at any time. It's in my dressing room back home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You could hardly imagine that Lord Bracknell and I would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up in the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a person. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning.
For heaven's sakes, Algy, don't play that ghastly tune! How idiotic you are!
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say that Gwendolyn refused you? I know it is a way she has. She is always refusing people. I think it most ill-natured of her.
Oh, Gwendolyn is as right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother, however, is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I don't know what a gorgon is like, but I'm pretty sure Lady Bracknell is one. At any rate, she is a monster, without being a myth, which is rather unfair.
I beg your pardon, Algy. I suppose I shouldn't talk of your own aunt in that way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct on when to die.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue with you about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
That is what things were originally made for.
Upon my word! If I thought that, I'd shoot myself! You don't think there's any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algy?
All girls become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does, that is his.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased, and quite as true as any modern observation ought to be.
Ugh, I am sick to death of cleverness. Everyone is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
We have.
Well, I should certainly like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, does Gwendolyn know the truth about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
Oh, the truth isn't the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about how to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and to someone else if she is plain.
Oh, that is nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Ernest?
Oh, by the end of the week I shall have gotten rid of Ernest. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You had much better say a severe chill.
And you're sure a severe chill is not hereditary or anything like of that kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My poor brother Ernest is carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
And what of Miss Cardew? Didn't you say she was very much interested in your brother Ernest? Won't she feel his loss a great deal?
Oh, that is quite all right. Cecily is not a silly romantic girl, I am glad to say. She has a capital appetite, goes for long walks, and pays no attention to her lessons at all.
I would very much like to meet this Cecily.
I will take very good care that you never do. She is excessively pretty and only just 18.
Does Gwendolyn know you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
Oh, one doesn't just blurt these things out. Gwendolyn and Cecily are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I will bet you anything you like that half an hour after meeting, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only call each other that after they have called each other a lot of other things first. Now, if we want to go to a good table at Willis's tonight, we really must go up and change. Did you know it is almost 7?
Oh, it is always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
What shall we do after dinner? Go to the theatre?
Oh no, I loathe listening.
Well, might we go to the club?
Oh no, I hate talking.
Well, let us trot round to the Empire at 10?
Oh no, I can't bear looking at things. It is so silly.
Well, what on earth shall we do?
Nothing.
It is awfully hard work doing nothing. But I must say, I don't mind the work when there is no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word!
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algy, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You are not quite old enough to do that yet.
Oh, my dear Gwendolyn.
Ernest, we may never be married! From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is I may marry someone else, and marry often. Nothing she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Oh, my own darling.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma, with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred in me the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name holds an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I know. What is your address in the country?
Oh, the Manor House, Walton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate, which will of course require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
Oh, my own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn round now.
Thanks, I've turned round already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, Miss Fairfax?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir. A glass of sherry, Lane? Yes, sir. Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I should probably not be back till Monday. You may pack my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and my Bunbury suit.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow is a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Oh, what a perfect pessimist you are, Lane.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir. Mr. Ernest Worthing.
There is a sensible, intellectual girl, the only girl I have ever cared about in my life, and... What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm just a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that is all.
If you don't take care, this Bunbury is going to get you into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious at all.
That is nonsense. You never talk anything but nonsense.
No one ever does.
Cecily! Surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours, especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson. But I don't like German!
It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite strange after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious I don't think he can be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish dear Uncle Jack would let that unfortunate young man, his brother, come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would. You know, things like German and geology and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I do not think that even I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak
and vacillating. Indeed, I do not think that I would desire to reclaim him. I am not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary we all carry about with us.
Yes, but memory often chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novels, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily, and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but I don't think that's very fair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas! No! The manuscript unfortunately was abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. Do your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
Ah, but I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Oh!
Oh, dear Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily! I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not about my German lessons when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you're not being inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spilled metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from B's. Mr. Worthing has not returned from town yet.
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sunday in London. He's not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man his brother seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical illusion merely drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, that I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache, and the stroll might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily! You will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Oh, even those metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy. Horrid geography. Horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4 the Albany W, Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed rather disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were here in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come out here. I suppose you would better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I am so afraid he will look just like everyone else. Oh, he does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I am sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. And you, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
But you mustn't think that I am wicked, little Cecily. I'm not wicked.
If you're not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you've not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Well, I have been rather reckless.
I am glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention this subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I am sure it must have been very pleasant.
Oh, it is much pleasanter here with you.
I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
That is a terrible disappointment, for I'm obliged to take the first train up on Monday. I have a business appointment that I am eager to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
The appointment is in London.
Oh, well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But I still think you would better wait for Uncle Jack to arrive. I know he wants to talk to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
Your emigrating. He went up to buy your outfit.
I would never let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you will require any neckties. Uncle is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Yes, well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Well, the reports I received of Australia and the next world have not been particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
Oh, I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me, little Cecily. You might make that your mission if you don't mind.
Oh, I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind me reforming myself this afternoon?
It would be rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
Well, that is because I'm hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me! I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely different life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. So won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
Hey, Marie-Charles.
I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, little Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You're the prettiest girl I've ever seen in my life.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that any sensible man would be happy to be caught in.
I don't think I should like to catch any sensible man. I wouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You're too much alone, Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope, never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up until the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, but that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
Oh, but is a man not as attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
And often I've been told not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. Where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing.
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
I've returned sooner than expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead.
Your brother Ernest?
Dead?
Quite dead.
Oh, what a lesson for him. I'm sure he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolences. You've at least the consolation of knowing you're the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Oh, poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad. In Paris, in fact. I received a telegram from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so let him reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prism. Charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seemed to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. No doubt you wish me to make some slight allusion to the tragic domestic affliction this Sunday. My sermon on the man in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion. Joyful, or as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation and festal days. The last time it was delivered as a charity sermon on prevention of discontent among the upper orders. The bishop, who was much present, was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
That reminds me. You mentioned christenings, I think, Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen all right? I mean, you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I have often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they do not seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested in, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any infant, dear doctor. I am very fond of children. No, the fact is, I would like to be christened myself, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you've been christened already.
Well, I don't remember anything about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
Well, I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if the thing should bother you in any sort of way, or if you think I am too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling and indeed the immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
Oh, you need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed I think advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour do you wish the ceremony performed?
Oh, I might trot around 5 if that would suit you.
Perfectly. In fact, I have 2 other ceremonies to be performed at that time. A case of twins that occurred in one of the outlying cottages on your own estate. Poor Jenkins, the carter, a most hard-working man.
Oh, I don't see much fun in being christened with other babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably. And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I shall intrude into a house of sorrow no longer. I would merely beg you to be not too much bowed down by grief. What seems to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! How glad I am to see you back! But what horrid clothes you've got on! Do go and change them.
Oh, Cecily! My child!
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do look happy. You look as if you had a toothache. And I have got such a surprise for you! Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother!
Who?
Your brother, Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense! I haven't got a brother!
Don't say that, Uncle Jack! No matter how badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. Oh, I'll tell him to come out here, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
My brother's in the dining room. I don't know what it all means. I think it perfectly absurd. Oh, good heavens!
Brother John, I have come up from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I have caused you and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There must be some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. Surely there must be much good in one who is so kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh! He's been talking to you about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he's told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury! Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. He's enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit all the faults were on my side. However, I must say that Brother John's coldness to me seems peculiarly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering this is my first time coming here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never!
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we should leave the 2 brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You've done a beautiful action today, dear child.
Let us not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
You young scoundrel, Algy! You have got to get out of here as soon as possible. I don't allow Bunbury here.
I have placed Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I trust that is all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir. I have unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay for more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has suddenly been called back to town.
Yes, sir.
Jack, what a fearful liar you are. I haven't been called back to town at all.
Oh, yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duties as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
Oh, I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in mourning for a man who is really staying with you for a whole week in your house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
Oh, you are certainly not staying with me for a whole week, as a guest or as anything else. You have got to leave. By the 4-5 train.
I certainly won't leave you so long as you're in mourning. It would be most unkind. Why, you would stay with me if I was in mourning, I suppose. I would think it most unfriendly if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you're not too long about it. I've never seen anyone take so long to get dressed with such little result.
Well, that is better at any rate than being always overdressed as you are.
If occasionally I am overdressed, I always make up for it by being always overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you've got to leave by the 4-5 train, and I hope you have a pleasant journey back to town. This bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
This bunburying is not... I think it has been a great success! I love Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see her before I go. And make arrangements for another Bunbury. There she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then we have got to part?
I'm afraid so. This is a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people to whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
Cecily, I hope I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to be the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. In fact, if you will allow me, I should like to enter your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? Well, I'd give anything to look at it, may I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of all her thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in novel form, I hope you will order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking from dictation. I have just reached absolute perfection. You may go on. I am quite ready for more. Oh, Ernest, don't cough. When one is dictating, one must speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should say that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily?
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
I think Uncle Jack would be very annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anyone in the whole world except for you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy, of course! Why, we've been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
And how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first mentioned to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you of course have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One thinks there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling! And when was the engagement finally settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to put an end to the matter one way or another. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear old tree here. The next day, I went into town and bought this little ring in your name. And this is the bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Did I buy this for you? It is very pretty, isn't it?
Oh, yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given for you leading such a bad life. Oh, and this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
All of my letters? But dear Cecily, I haven't written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember all too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote me after I had broken off our engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course, on the 22nd of March last. You may read the entry if you like. Today I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I felt it better to do so. The weather continues charming.
But why was it broken off? What had I done? I had done nothing at all. I am very hurt indeed, Cecily, to hear that our engagement was broken off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
Well, it would hardly have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. Besides, I forgave you before the week was out.
Oh, what a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
Oh, you dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally, does it?
Yes, with a little help from others.
I am so glad.
You promise you'll never break our engagement off again, Cecily?
I couldn't possibly, now that we have actually met. Besides, there is the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You mustn't laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to fall in love with someone whose name was Ernest. There is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Ernest.
But my dear child, do you mean to say you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what other name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
Oh, my dear, sweet, lovely little darling. I really don't see any reason why you should object to the name of Algernon. It is not a bad name. In fact, it is a rather aristocratic name. Why, half the chaps in bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, could you not love me if my name was Algy?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I'm afraid I could not give you my undivided attention.
Your rector here is very experienced in the rites and ceremonials of the church.
Yes, Dr. Chasuble is the most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must meet him on a very important christening.
What?
I mean, a very important business.
Oh!
I shan't be gone for more than half an hour.
Considering we have been engaged since February the 14th, and since I've only met you today for the first time, I think it's rather hard that you should leave me for such long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
Impetuous boy. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into my diary.
A Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing. On very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you may bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax, I suppose one of the many good elderly women associated with Uncle Jack in some philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. I think it is so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew, what very sweet name. Something tells me that we are going to be great friends. I really like you more than I can say, and my first impressions of people are never wrong.
Oh, how nice of you to like me so much after we've known each other a comparatively short time. Oh, pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
Oh, with pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolen, won't you?
If you wish.
Then it is quite settled, is it not?
Oh, I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity for me mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You've heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I'm glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think it is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for a man. And indeed, once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate. And I do not like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is part of the system. So, do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Not at all, Gwendolen. I am very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no. I live here.
Your mother, no doubt, or a female relative of advanced years, resides here also?
Oh, no. I have no mother, nor, in fact, any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes. I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh. He never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. However, I'm not sure that this news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I'm very fond of you, Cecily. I have liked you ever since I met you. But now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help but expressing a wish you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so alluring in appearance. In fact, if I might speak candidly...
Oh, pray do. I think that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor... Cecily, I wish you were full 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty would be impossible to him as deception. But even men of the highest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the physical charms of others. Modern, no less ancient history provides us with many painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, history indeed would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn, but did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Oh. He never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I am sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a very long time.
That accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I've never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems almost distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
Dearest Gwendolyn, I see no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the facts sometime next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My dear Cecily, I'm afraid there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
There must be some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. I'm so sorry, dear Cecily, if this is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolyn, if it were to cause you any mental or physical anguish, but I feel bound to point out that since Ernest has proposed to you, he has clearly changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into some foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have got into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion like this, it becomes more than one's moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you! This is no time for wearing a shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade!
I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade! It is clear that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lead tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
yes, a great many. From one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country. If anybody who is anybody does, the country always bores me to death.
Ah, yes, but that is what the newspapers are calling agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering from it very much just at present. It is almost an epidemic among them, or so I have been told. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen in the best households nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I ask most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no ways to which I would not go. From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you.
I felt you were false and deceitful. My opinions in these matters are never wrong. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you've many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Ernest! My own Ernest!
Oh, my own darling.
A moment. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
Dear Cecily! Of course not! What could have put such an idea in your pretty little head?
Thank you, you may.
I knew there must have been some misunderstanding. Miss Fairfax, the gentleman whose arm is currently around your waist is my dear guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack! Here is Ernest.
Oh, my love!
Oh, a moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady here?
To what young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolyn!
Yes, the good heavens, Gwendolyn! I mean to Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What would have put a thought in your pretty little head?
Thank you, you may.
I felt there must be some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is currently embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrieff.
Algernon Moncrieff! Oh! Are you really called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh!
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. And I could deny anything if I liked. But my name certainly is John. It has been John for years.
It seems to me a gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily!
My sweet home Gwendolyn!
You will call me sister, will you not?
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An excellent idea. Mr. Worthing, there is one question we would like to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is of some small importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn? Cecily? It's very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. In fact, it is the first time in my life I have ever been reduced to such a painful position. And I am very inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. But I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother Ernest. I have never had a brother. Not even of any kind. And I have not the smallest intentions of having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Never. Not even of any kind.
It is clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant situation for a young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us in there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call plundering, I suppose. Yes!
And a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is!
You have no right whatsoever to Bunbury here!
Oh, that is absurd. One has a right to Bunbury wherever one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburys, good heavens!
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants any amusement in life. I am serious about Bunburying. What on earth you are serious about, I haven't the remotest idea. About everything I should fancy. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to go down to the country as often as you used to, dear Algy. And a very good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off color, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was. And not a bad thing either.
As for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say that you're taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable. To say nothing of the fact that she's my ward.
I can see no plausible defense at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
Well, I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn, that is all. I love her.
Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There is certainly no chance of you marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there is much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
What? Well, that is no business of yours.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It is very vulgar to talk about one's own business. Only stockbrokers and people like that ever do, and then merely at dinner parties.
How can you sit there, calmly eating muffins while we are in this horrible trouble? I can't make out. You seem to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my calves. One must always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it is perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all, under the circumstances.
Whenever I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that concerns me. Indeed, when I am in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything but food and drink. At the present moment, I am eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
Well, that is no reason why you should eat them all in that greedy way.
I wish you would have some tea cake. I don't like tea cake.
Well, for heaven's sakes, I suppose a man may be allowed to eat his own muffins in his own garden.
You just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you, under the circumstances. That's a very different thing.
Yes, but the muffins are the same.
Algy, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner first. That's absurd. I never go without my dinner. No one ever does, except for vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Ernest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30, and I naturally will take the name of Ernest. Gwendolyn would wish it. We can't both be christened Ernest, it's absurd. Besides, I have every right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence at all that I ever was christened by anybody. And I should think it extremely probable that I never was, and so does Dr. Chasuble. It's entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I haven't been christened for years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you're not quite sure of your ever having been christened, I must say I think it rather dangerous you're venturing on it now. It might make you very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected to you was very nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said it yourself that a severe chill was not hereditary.
It used to be, I know, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
Oh, that is nonsense. You are always talking nonsense.
Jack, you are at the muffins again! I wish you wouldn't. There are only 2 left. I told you I'm particularly fond of muffins.
But I hate tea cake!
Then why on earth do you allow for tea cake to be served up for guests? The ideas you have of hospitality.
Algy? I have already told you to go. I don't want you here! Why don't you go?
Because I haven't quite finished my tea yet. And there's still 1 muffin left.
The fact that they did not follow us at once into the house, like anyone else would have done, seems to me to show they have some sense of shame left.
They are eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us. Couldn't you cough?
I haven't a cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery!
They are approaching. That is very forward of them.
Let us maintain a dignified silence.
Certainly. It is the only thing to do now.
My dearest Cecily, I love you. My heart must be assuaged. Think of us together, think of all those lovely letters, think of how we are engaged. Hey, dilly da, nonny, nonny. Hey, dilly da, nonny, no. Deloo-ri, hey, chiraloo-aloo-ri, hey. Hey, dilly da, nonny, no. Gwendolyn, my darling, I adore you. Just give me one look back. Just a glance. Things needn't look so bleak. But remember, his name's Jack. Hey, dilly da, nonny, nonny. Hey, dilly da, nonny, no. Deloo-ri, hey, chiraloo-aloo-ri, hey. Hey, dilly da, nonny, no. You're the prettiest I've ever met. Do you really want a man with all that debt? We are engaged, it says so in her diary. Too bad your engagement was a made-up story. Try to forget about my name, dear, though I don't wish to brag. I'd be an ideal husband. But remember how his first house was an old handbag. Hey, diddy da, nonny, nonny. Hey, diddy da, nonny, no. Deloo-ri, hey, chiraloo-ri, hey, diddy da, nonny, no. Oh, this is just absurd! She's my cousin! She's my ward! Hey, dilly down, nonny, no.
This dignified silence seems to produce the most unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing! There is one question I would like to ask you.
Oh, Gwendolyn, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrieff, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have the opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems a satisfactory answer, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
Oh, I don't. But that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. I had forgotten. And matters of grave importance. Style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have every opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts on the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is no time for German skepticism. Their answers seem exceptionally satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am quite content with what Mr. Moncrieff said. His voice alone instills one with absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Oh, yes! No! I mean Could we both not speak at the same time?
An excellent idea! I nearly always speak at the same time as other people! Will you take the time for me? Certainly! And a 1 and a 2 and a 3.
Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For me? You are prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
To please me, you are ready to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
How absurd to talk about the equality of the sexes, where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned. Men are infinitely beyond us.
We are!
They have moments of physical courage of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling!
Lady Bracknell!
Oh, heavens!
Gwendolyn, what does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthy, Mamma.
Come here! Sit down! Sit down immediately! Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young, a physical weakness in the old. A prize, sir, for my daughter's sudden fight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by a means of a small coin. I followed her at once by a luggage train. Her unhappy father is, glad to say, under the impression that she's attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. Indeed, I have never undeceived him on any question I would consider it wrong. But of course, you will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolyn, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now as regards Algernon. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Bunbury, no, he's not here at present. He is somewhere else. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
I killed him this afternoon. I mean to say, he died this afternoon.
Well, what did he die of?
But Bunbury, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he is well punished for his morbidity.
My dear Aunt Augusta, I mean to say that he was found out. The doctors found out Bunbury could not live. That is what I mean. So Bunbury died.
He seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physician. I am glad, however, that he made up his mind at the last to some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we have finally gotten rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask Mr. Worthy, who was that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrieff and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know whether there's anything peculiarly exciting in the air in this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that go on seem to me considerably above the proper average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square. SW, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran. Fifeshire, NB.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have the court guides of the period. They are open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have named strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messieurs, Markby, and Markby.
Markby. A firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I am told that one of the Mr. Markbys has occasionally been seen at evening parties. So far, I am satisfied.
Oh, well, that is very kind of you, Lady Bracknell. You will also be pleased to hear that I have in my possession certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles. Both the German and the English variety.
A life crowded with incident. I see, though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I am not myself in favor of premature experiences. Gwendolyn, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I had better ask you if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, only about £130,000 in the funds. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you again.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000. And in the funds. Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady now that I look at her. Few girls of the present day have any really solid qualities. Any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of services. Come over here, dear. Pretty child, your dress is sadly simple, and your hair seems almost as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvelous result in such a brief space of time. I remember recommending one to young Lady Lansing, and after 3 months, her own husband did not know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn around for me, dear. No, the side view is what I want. Yes, quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The 2 weak points in our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. The chin a little higher, dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn. They are worn very high just at present. Algernon.
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world. I don't give 2 pence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. But of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend on. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind. But I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give you my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Oh, thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I'm not in favor of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's characters before marriage. Which I think is never advisable.
Forgive me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot legally marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may also say, an ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more can one desire?
Oh, it pains me very much, Lady Bracknell, to speak quite frankly to you about your nephew. But the fact is, I do not approve of his moral character at all. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible. He is not Zonian.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. During my temporary absence in London on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house under the false pretense of being my brother Ernest. Under an assumed name, he drank, I've been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of my Pierre Jaurès Brut 89, a wine I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing in his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he was very well aware from the very first that I have no brother, that I have never had a brother, not even of any kind, and I have not the smallest intentions of having one in the future. I told him so distinctly myself yesterday afternoon.
Ahem, Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided entirely to overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
Oh, that is quite generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come here, sweet child. How old are you, dear?
Well, I'm really only 18, but I always admit to 20 when I go to evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties, and well, it won't be long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. I don't think your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me for interrupting you again, Lady Bracknell. But it is only fair to tell you that according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not legally come of age until she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be of grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who, of their own free choice, have remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. To my knowledge, she has remained 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which has been many years ago now. I see no reason why our dear Cecily should not be more attractive at the age you mentioned than she is at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algy, could you really wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that time. I don't like waiting even 5 minutes for anyone. It always makes me rather cross. I know I am not punctual myself, of course, but I do like punctuality in others, and waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
What is to be done then, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrieff.
My dear Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait till she is 35, a remark which I am bound to say seems to me to show a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But, Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will most certainly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us have to look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear, we've missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more would expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christening, sir? Is that not somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? The idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses. Lord Bracknell will be highly displeased if he learned that that was the way in which you are wasting your time and money.
Am I to understand there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I don't think as things are now it would be of much practical value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
I am grieved to hear such sentiment from you, Mr. Worthing. They savor the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views in which I have refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. However, as your present mood seems particularly secular, I will return to the church at once, for I have just been informed by a pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I'm on my way to join her.
Pray allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove to be of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism, a female of the repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She's the most cultivated of ladies. She's the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
Oh, I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I have been waiting for you there for an hour and 3/4.
Prism! Come here, Prism! Prism! Where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104 Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. Through the elaborate investigation of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained a manuscript of a 3-volume novel of a more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that is forever branded in my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had with me also a somewhat old and but capacious handbag in which I had placed a book of fiction I had worked on in a few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I could never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and the baby in the handbag!
But where did you place the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Please, Miss Prism. This is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you placed that handbag that contained that essay!
I left it in one of the cloakrooms in one of the larger railway stations in London!
What railway station?
Victoria! The Brighton Line!
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolyn, wait here for me.
If you are not long, Mr. Worthing, I will wait here for you all my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect Dr. Transbull. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered the thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
This noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if he is having an argument. I hate arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
It has stopped now.
I wish you would arrive at some conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Miss Prism! Miss Prism! Is this the handbag? Examine it carefully before you speak.
The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes, here is the injury it received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. And here, on the lining, is the stain caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred in Leamington. And here, on the lock, are my initials. I had forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. Oh, it is such a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than just that handbag. I was the baby you placed in it!
You?
Yes! Mother!
Mr. Worthing! I am unmarried!
Unmarried? Well, I do not deny that is a serious blow, but then again, who has a right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you!
Mr. Worthing! There is some error. There is the lady who can tell you who you truly are.
Huh? Lady Bracknell. Well, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I'm afraid that the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrieff, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
What? Algy's elder brother! Did I have a brother after all? I always said I had a brother! Cecily, how could you have ever doubted I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother! Algy, you young scoundrel! You will have to treat me with more respect in the future. You have never behaved like a brother to me in all your life.
Well, not today, old boy, I admit. I did try my best, however, though I was out of practice.
My own one! But what own one are you? What is your Christian name now that you have become someone else?
Good heavens, I had quite forgotten the fact. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose?
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolyn.
Then the question better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time that Miss Prism placed me in the handbag, I had been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christenings, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. Well, that is settled. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present moment recall what the general's Christian name was, but I have no doubt that he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but only in his later years, and that was a result of Indian climate and marriage and indigestion and things of that kind.
Algy, can't you recollect what your father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, I was never on speaking terms with the man. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army list of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta.
The general was essentially a man of peace, except for in his domestic life. But I have no doubt that his name would appear in any military directories.
Merritt! The army list of the last 40 years. These records should have been my constant study. M. Generals. Maxbaum, Malum, Magley. What ghastly names they have. Markby, captain, lieutenant, lieutenant colonel, colonel general, 1869. Christian names, Ernest John. Well, I always told you, Gwendolyn, my name was Ernest. I mean, it is Ernest after all. I mean, naturally it is Ernest.
Yes, I remember the general was called Ernest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest! My own Ernest! I knew from the start that you could have no other name.
Gwendolyn, it's a terrible thing for a man to find out that all his life he's been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change.
Oh, my own one.
Oh, Letitia!
Friedrich, at last!
Cecily, at last! Gwendolyn, at last!
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta. For the first time in my life, I realized the vital importance of being earnest.